All right. So now we are going to look at how to create another type of table, or let's say another kind of table. So it's a table where one of the cells span multiple rows. In other words, a multi-row table. So this is an example. So here we have a table which indicates what? A list of newspapers by country. So we have 2 countries, and for each of these countries, there's another column, and that's list or specify newspapers that are in that country. So here we have USA, there are 3 newspapers. We have UK, there are 2 newspapers. You can see that this is 3, so that means we have 3 rows, but then the country is 1, which is USA, and that is why we need to have such a design so that if you look at this table, you know that okay, all these items here, they belong to this country. And then also for this, so here with this one is spanning multiple rows because we have 3 rows here, 1 2 3. So this is another type of table that you are likely to encounter or design yourselves. So let's look at how we are going to create this kind of table, i.e. a multi-row table. So let's get started. So again, we create our document class 10pt article. So the article, the A is lowercase. That's what we have here. All right. Now let's see. Once we have this, let's just make sure the spellings are correct. So here there's a red, meaning that there's something wrong here. It's incomplete. It's document class, so the class is double. That's what we should have here. So that's /document class, right? So I'll just do it again just to be sure. I'll say /document class 10pt article. And then here, if you are going to create a multi-row table such as this, you need to have an additional package. So we will say /use package, /use package, and we indicate the package. So the package is called multi-row. If you want to create a multi-row table, you need to have this package loaded. Then we have /begin documents /end document. So this is the minimum we need to get started. I'll just run it to make sure everything is okay, and then I'll proceed. All right. So once we have this, then we also need to bring our table. So in the table, we have /begin table, that's the table environment. And then here, you can see that it says what placement. So I talked about this in the previous tutorial when we were using the classic tables. Okay, so placement, where do you want to place it? Do you want to place it up, that's on top of the page, or below the page, or exactly where it's being created? Now, for the sake of this tutorial, let's use H. That's the placement. So I'll say H, and then I'll bring my exclamation mark to override any default settings. Then I'll come to /end table. Let's spell it correctly. /end table. So in between is where we are going to have our table created. Now, once we are done here, we are going to center our table. We want to make it centered. So I'll say /begin center /end center. I want to center the table. So that's why I'm putting this here. Then I want to give it a caption. If you look at our table here, it says a list of newspapers by country. That is the caption for the table. So I'll say /caption, a list of newspapers by country. That's what we have here. Okay. All right. So now what do? Now we create our table. So here I think I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to minimize it so that we can have it side by side. So if you look at this table here, I'll just zoom in here. Yeah. If you look at this table here, we have the caption created, and now we need to indicate the table itself. That means you need to also have your design available. So here we have what? 2 columns. That's what we have here. All right. If you look at it critically, we see that we have 2 columns. All right. And then we need that information first. All right. So we have to create our tabular objects and then specify the column, just as we did with the classic table. All right. So we will say /begin, and then we indicate what? Tabular. We need this first, and then we specify our columns in a curly bracket. So I bring my column in these 2 curly brackets. So we have 2 columns, and for each of the columns I also want to make sure that there's a line drawn, okay, on the left side and on the right side for the last column. We need to have these border lines. Basically it's the border lines, all right, the vertical lines. And so here I bring my vertical line, I'll say C, another vertical line, I'll say C, another vertical line, because we have 2 columns. That's what we have here. These are the 2 columns. All right. So once you have this created, then you are ready to go. Now, after creating this, before we add the first row, which is this one, we want to make sure a line has been drawn above it. We need that line. And so we will say /h line. All right. So we have our H line drawn. Then we will now proceed. Now we need to do this. We are adding the next row, which will be the rows which contain the headers, i.e. country and the newspapers. And so what we have to do is to say what? Country and newspapers. So this is a separator. Okay, it's separating the columns. It tells LaTeX that on the left side is one column, on the right side is another column. That's what we need here. And then because this is the end of the row, we need to indicate // double slash to tell LaTeX this is the end. In the next line, we want to have a line separating this row from the incoming row. So we have to say /h line. That's horizontal line. We are drawing that line. So we are done with this. So this line here is what we are drawing with the /h line. That's also important. Then the next record, we indicate our USA and then the newspapers. So this is where we start the work. Now, if you look at this one and this one, this design, we see that under the newspapers column, there are 3 rows, and here is just one country. So that means that this cell that we have here, it's going to span 3 rows. It is going to span 3 rows. I'll just enlarge it here. It is going to span 3 rows. And so that is where the multi-row package comes in. So because this cell is going to span multiple rows, you will need to say multi-row. And then we need to indicate how many rows it's going to span that cell. We see that it is 3. 1, 2, 3. And so we need to indicate that in another curly brackets like this. That's what we need here. Now, after indicating the number of rows which this particular cell, or let's say that column, is going to span, we also need to indicate something else, and that is the column width. So the column width, let me just do it here. The column width, you have to use an appropriate column for it. So I repeat, you will have to indicate an appropriate column width. So here, for example, I'll just say 4 EM. Now these are lengths. Okay, so the lengths we have P, C, EM. There are different lengths available for you to. So you have to determine the appropriate one. I think I'll leave the link to the page that shows the length measurement, or let's say length units you can use. So just take note of that. So we have that here, and then you indicate now the label. Here it's USA. So you indicate that here. So you say USA. All right, that is it. Then this becomes that particular column. So in the next column, you have to say end. All right, which is here. I'll just do it here. End, and then you give that column. So here, we start with the very first one here, the first row here, which is what? The New York Times. So here, what we should also take note of that this is one column, this is another column, this another column, the same column, the same column. All right. So when it comes to the fair initialization, which is USC, this is it. So for these ones, you have to include them line by line. And so the first one will always go with the multi-row which you have created. And so we'll say the New York Times. All right, and then you end it because that is one row. Now, what about the subsequent rows? How do we also factor the USA in? We have already done that here with the multi-row functionality. And so subsequently, we leave its placeholder blank in the next line. So in the next line, for example, when we come here, instead of we specify USA again, we leave it blank. So we say end, and then we indicate the next column for the newspapers, which is Washington Post. I'll just redo it again. The Washington Posts. We end it with our double slash because that's the end of the row. We repeat the same thing here for the third one, which is New York Post. Then we end it, and then when we come down here, we say /h line. So why do we say /h line? Because we want to separate the USA records from the UK records, which we are yet to add. All right, and so we are done with this one. Now, actually, let's do this. Let's even run it. We will run it first. Let's even do this. Once you are done with this one, then the next record becomes that for UK, which we had here, which we are going to do here. All right. So that record will be this way. That record that we have is also a multi-row. So the same pattern that we had is what we will put in here. So here it becomes /multi-row, and here it is spanning 2 rows. Guardian, and the Sun. And so it's 2. And then the column width, we will use the same for EM. And then here it becomes UK. Then end, we bring the first newspaper, which is the Guardian. We will end that row, and in the next row, we leave the first column blank because we have already specified it here. And then we go to the Sun. And then we end it. This is how it becomes. All right. And so when we are done with this, then we are going to do what? End our tabular. Or we can add the /h line first. Then we end our tabular. Then we end our center. We will have something like this. All right. Center. But here we have already added the end center already, so that means we don't even need this one again. It's supposed to be once. So I'll just do it here. So this becomes our final command that we have. I'll just open the PDF again here so we see. So here in this table we have our caption. So we first begin with our what? Tabular environment, which is here. This. And then the table environment, and then this. I'll just add it here for us to see. That's what we begin with, and we specify the placements, which is to be here. Then, because we want to center the table, we brought the /begin center and then /end center, and then in between that block, we added a caption and then our tabular environment. So with the tabular, just like with the classical table, we define our tabular environment and indicate the number of columns that table will have. And then we add our formatting. And then when we go to the multi-row, which is this one here, it's going to span 3 rows. And therefore, we have to indicate multi-row 3 and then specified the column width. And then actually give the label for that particular column. And then the first record or the first column associated with it under the newspapers. Now the subsequent column, because these are all associated with USA, we don't need to bring USA again. We just leave it blank. That's why the end is supposed to be there like this. So once you are done, then you can run. So let's run this command and see what comes up. So this is what we have. So now I'll just build a view for us to see. So this is what we get. Wonderful. I'll zoom in a bit for us to see. So this becomes our multi-row table. Now, if you look at this table and this table here, you see that the country and newspapers have been boldened. And so that means you can bolden it here. So there is something you can add. Now, if you want to bolden a text, it's supposed to be /textbf, and then you indicate what you want to do. So here, it's supposed to be here, country and newspapers. So that means you can say /textbf, and then the labels come into the curly bracket. The same thing here, /textbf, and then the same thing comes here. All right. Now, once you have this, let's rerun it again. Then we are going to see it here, clear. Okay. So this is how we create a multi-row table.